My name is Clara, I'm 29 years old, and I work for a company. I married my husband Nathan this year after a relationship of more than 2 years. We started our married life in the apartment I've lived in since my single days, a gift from my father when I started working. After my brother and his wife decided to move in with my parents, I took the opportunity to start a new chapter in my life by moving out on my own. My father, who is not short on resources, bought me an apartment near our family home. Whether his intention was to support me or simply keep me close, I found myself in a wonderful, spacious apartment. Nathan, on the other hand, was living in a small apartment that had become too cramped for both of us once we decided to get married. So he moved into my larger apartment. My first visit to the Nathan family home, located in a snowy region, was during winter. Coming from the city, I was struck by the amount of snow and the cold. His family home looked like something out of a fairy tale. My mother-in-law and brother-in-law lived there. In the past, when my father-in-law was alive, they lived as part-time farmers, surrounded by fields and distant neighbors. What surprised me most was that the toilet and shower were outside the house. While I could tolerate it for occasional visits, the idea of staying there long-term, especially during the harsh winters, seemed uncomfortable and challenging. It took courage to go out to the toilet in the middle of the night, and I was afraid of catching a cold after showering in the freezing temperatures. During my visit for our wedding, I didn't stay overnight, so I didn't experience all the hassles of off-site accommodations. However, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law were kind and welcoming, which reassured me about staying there. Even though we wouldn't be living together, I wanted to build a good relationship with them. But something was troubling me. Whenever my mother-in-law was alone with my husband, she would mutter complaints about something. What bothered me even more was that my husband's brother had been married before and divorced after about a year, something my husband had kept from me. While I understood that marital problems could arise, my husband's silence about his brother's divorce prevented me from asking further questions. At our wedding, my mother-in-law was all smiles, which my father praised as a sign of her kindness. I smiled back, but my mother had a slightly different opinion. Despite her smile in front of others, she advised, she often appears sullen when she thinks she's not being seen. Be careful, she might be two-faced. But I dismissed her concerns, believing there wouldn't be any problems as long as we lived together. We began our married life in the apartment happily, and without any worries. But 3 months into our marriage, my husband started dumping all the household chores on me and making decisions on his own. Even though we both worked and promised to share household responsibilities, he began to slack off. At first, he would help me clean the bathroom and sometimes even prepare dinner when I came home late. But lately he's become reluctant to do even these tasks, leaving everything to me. If I came home late and started cooking, he would sometimes shout impatiently, "Hurry up, I'm starving from work." I would also come home tired and hungry from work, and I often found myself preparing dinner feeling resentful. What's more, I was upset that he made all the decisions on his own. There may have been signs before our marriage, but I misunderstood him and thought he was a decisive and trustworthy man. Shortly after our wedding, furniture and a sofa suddenly arrived at our house. I was surprised and asked my husband, "What's this? Where do you intend to put this sofa and furniture?" He smiled and replied, "I don't feel this room suits my current style, so I thought I'd replace the furniture with something more to my liking." He wanted to get rid of all the furniture I had chosen and change the room's atmosphere with furniture that suited his taste. If he had consulted me, we could have chosen the furniture together, but my husband acted entirely on his own, completely ignoring my preferences. It's fine for him to design his room however he likes, but I didn't appreciate him unilaterally altering our shared living space. His design taste lacked cohesion, and I was shocked by his choice of mismatched furniture colors and styles. Then came an unexpected suggestion. "It would be nice if you paid for it. After all, this is your apartment, isn't it?" Honestly, I was already annoyed that he'd taken over the living room with his tasteless furniture, and now he was asking me to pay for it. I wondered if he was joking, and asked him again why I should pay. Besides, it was furniture he'd bought himself. I don't usually respond, but this time my response was firm. My husband seemed speechless, but it was clear he didn't want to spend his own money. This year was our first Christmas since we got married, so we decided to spend the holiday at his parents' house. It was my first time staying at my in-laws' house, so I was nervous and anxious. At that moment, my mother-in-law spoke with a kind smile, saying, "Clara, you can relax here." But I couldn't just sit idly by. Following my mother's advice, I remained cautious. My mother-in-law might have a hidden agenda. When I first arrived, my mother-in-law did nothing but relax. In the past, I used to eat alone in the kitchen. "It's nice to eat together now," she said, puzzling me with her stories from the past. I noticed my brother-in-law was trying to warn her, but my husband seemed oblivious. After enduring my mother-in-law's sarcastic remarks, I offered to clean up after dinner. She smiled and said, "I'll do it. I don't want you breaking our precious dishes." That's when I realized my mother's advice was spot on. The first day had been filled with her sarcasm. But the next day, things took a turn for the worse. That evening, my husband went out drinking with his friends and his brother-in-law, who was away on a business trip. It was just me and my mother-in-law. To be honest, I was incredibly nervous. After dinner, while she was showering, I managed to relax a little. But when she came out, she said, "I'm going to bed now. Make sure you lock the front door." I reluctantly agreed and prepared to shower in the separate bathroom, which was cold. Perhaps the locals were used to it, but it was difficult for me. After I'd settled down, the lights in the main house suddenly went out while I was relaxing in the bathtub. I thought I heard footsteps outside, so I stayed still and listened carefully. After a while, the lights went out completely, and it was pitch black. At first, I thought there was a power outage, but when I looked out the window, the lights in the neighboring house were still on. I began to suspect that my mother-in-law was playing a trick on me. I hadn't expected my mother-in-law to do something so awful, but since she was making sarcastic remarks with a smile, I felt uneasy. Thinking it might be true, I rushed out of the bathroom, dried myself, and put on my pajamas. The room was completely dark at first, and I couldn't see a thing, but as my eyes adjusted, the moonlight illuminated the room. As I changed, I reflected on how ridiculous this childish prank was. I tried to open the door to get out, but no matter how hard I pushed, it wouldn't budge. Even slamming it shut didn't help. I panicked. There was a window, but it was covered with a screen from the outside. Luckily, I had my smartphone with me. I tried calling my husband for help, but he didn't answer. On the third attempt, he finally picked up and suddenly shouted, "Why are you bothering me? Can't you see I'm having a good time?" He seemed drunk, but I desperately needed his help, so I pleaded, "I can't get out because the bathroom door won't open. Please come now." However, he didn't seem to understand or care, replying, "It's your fault for showering at this hour. I'm drunk and can't come. Goodbye." After he hung up, I tried calling him several times, but he seemed to have turned his phone off. I considered calling the police or civil defense, but I thought that was a last resort. I hesitated to report it to the police for fear of upsetting my mother-in-law. I first tried to find a way to escape on my own. I thought if I shouted from the bathroom window, someone might notice me, but the window was frozen. My husband mentioned that the pipes sometimes freeze. If I had stayed there all night, I might have frozen to death. As I was reluctantly about to call the police, I heard a voice outside. "Is the power out? Hello, is anyone inside?" I was relieved to hear that voice. Then I heard a knock on the door. Realizing someone was trying to help, the door was quickly opened. I thanked the old man. He sighed and said, "She never learns. She's trying to torment her daughter-in-law again." This old man was a neighbor of my husband's family, a distant relative, and he had directed me to his house. When his wife saw me, she looked surprised. After the old man explained the situation, she invited me in, seemingly speechless. The old woman offered me a blanket, as I was only wearing pajamas, and gave me warm tea. Once I had calmed down, the old man told me about my mother-in-law's history of abusing her daughters-in-law. "Your mother-in-law is used to bullying her daughters-in-law. She has locked several of them in the bathroom before. The eldest son's wife was locked in the bathroom several times, and eventually she left the house. Not only that, but when my husband had another fiancée before that, his mother-in-law locked her in the bathroom too. The elderly couple noticed the bathroom light shining brightly in the dark and became suspicious, so they came to investigate. The elderly couple next door knew that my mother-in-law had trapped others in the bathroom before, and it seemed they had rescued her on several occasions. They were aware of our marriage and appeared concerned that my mother-in-law might repeat the same prank. Since it was late and the main house was locked, I decided to stay with the neighbors all night. The next morning, I was woken by the sound of an ambulance siren. I quickly looked out the window and saw an ambulance arriving at my husband's parents' house. My husband was standing motionless by the separate bathroom. I headed towards that spot as well. I thought my husband might have mistakenly believed I was still trapped in the bathroom and called an ambulance. Of course, no one was in the bathroom. I felt sorry for the paramedics who were called because of my husband's mistake. When I approached my husband, he started shouting as soon as he saw my face. "Why is my mother lying there? Weren't you being held in the bathroom?" Shocked by those words, I looked inside the bathroom and indeed saw a person lying with their arms and legs stretched out. The woman the paramedic was speaking to sat touching the back of her head. Her life didn't seem to be in danger. From her appearance, I knew she was my mother-in-law. I didn't understand why she was there. One of the paramedics explained, "It appears she hit her head and lost consciousness. We're taking her to the hospital for tests. It seems she slipped on the soap on the floor and hit her head. In my panic when the lights went out, things like soap might have scattered on the floor. I couldn't clean it up in the dark, and it seems my mother-in-law slipped on that soap early this morning. Perhaps she came into the bathroom to check on me and slipped and fell because of the soap." As my mother-in-law was being carried on a stretcher, she glared at me. When my husband was taken to the hospital by ambulance, the neighbors approached me and said, "I'm glad you weren't hurt. It's divine retribution for the harassment you endured as a daughter-in-law." I thanked the neighbors again, realizing that if it weren't for the old man, I would have been the one in the ambulance. I quickly changed my clothes and told my brother-in-law that my mother-in-law had been taken to the hospital. He said he would go to the hospital immediately. I went alone to the separate bathroom and started thinking about the events of the previous night. There was a stick on the bathroom door used to lock it. That's why I couldn't get out. That day, my mother-in-law returned home with my husband and his brother and directed her anger at me, saying, "Because you came out of the bathroom without telling me, this happened." While I was thinking of a response, my husband also expressed his anger, saying, "Exactly. If Clara had stayed in the bathroom, my mother wouldn't have suffered like this." But my sister's husband angrily responded to my husband and mother-in-law, saying, "What are you thinking? Stop this cruel game of locking my sister-in-law in the bathroom." After that, my brother-in-law returned with a suitcase and said to my husband and mother-in-law, "I have finished taking care of my mother. I am leaving this house. Do as you please." I couldn't take it anymore, so I asked my brother-in-law, "I'm leaving too. Can you take me to the nearest station?" My husband tried desperately to stop me. "Who said you can leave like that?" I replied firmly, "Let's separate. Did you help me when I begged you yesterday? I'm going to get the divorce papers ready." I got into my brother-in-law's car, and he drove me to the nearest police station. He apologized repeatedly, saying, "I'm truly sorry, Clara. I never expected you to suffer like this. These cruel people are now strangers to me." I went back to my apartment, prepared the divorce papers, and packed my husband's things. He was shocked when he saw his things packed when he returned, thinking I was joking about the divorce. But seeing the divorce papers made him very angry. "You want a divorce over something so trivial? You weren't hurt, were you?" I realized that talking to him was useless, so I calmly handed him the divorce papers. He signed them reluctantly. My husband left my apartment, but it seems he either doesn't have the money to rent another place or hasn't found anywhere to live yet. The truth is, my husband had been financially dependent on me throughout our marriage, squandering his own salary and accumulating debt. After being evicted, he initially stayed with a female colleague. However, even she distanced herself from him, and it seems he lost everyone who was willing to support him. Having lost his home, been pursued by debt collectors, and now his job, my husband found himself in dire financial straits. My mother-in-law has become the talk of the neighborhood, with rumors circulating that she harassed her daughter-in-law to the point of divorce. People seem to be avoiding her. I heard from my brother-in-law that she lives a secluded life, much like my husband. Furthermore, since my brother-in-law has also left home, she relies solely on her pension, putting her in a difficult financial situation. In the countryside, getting around is essential, but with no one at home and the neighbors' dislike for her, it seems she can't get any help. My mother-in-law, who has been abandoned by her family and neighbors, seems to be living completely alone. My husband is preoccupied with his own problems and unable to help his mother. After the divorce, I got rid of the cheap furniture my husband had chosen. I started a new life with my favorite furniture, optimistic about a better future, and looking for new, positive experiences.
अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं, गए जो दिन सहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं। तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा बेसर्द लगता है। दिल का हर एक कोना अब बहुत ही दूर भरता है। अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं, ये जो दिन सुहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं। तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा सर्द लगता है। दिल का हर एक कोना बहुत ही दर्द भरता है। मेरे साए भी मुझसे अब जुदा होने को कहते हैं। तुझे खोने की राहों में ये आंसू बहने लगते हैं। कहाँ जाऊं कहाँ ढूंढूं मेरा वो साजो सामा, तो मेरी हर एक तमन्ना तू, मेरी दर्द का असर हंसाए मेरे तन्हा सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर, दर्द का असर।